Hi everyone, I'm Nora, and this is Dark Justice. Tonight, we step into a case that left an entire country heartbroken.
If God came to you and said, I'm going to give you this beautiful daughter, but you'll only have her for 18 years, and then we need to take her back, would you still want her? And I would take those 18 years and go through the pain rather than have nothing. And although just now that probably offers no words of comfort for Phoenix's parents.
It's the story of Phoenix Spencer Horn, a 21-year-old whose light was stolen by the man she trusted most. The girl who rose above everything Phoenix, known to her friends as Fee, was the kind of person whose name matched her spirit. She worked hard, laughed easily, and carried a warmth that drew people close. At only 21, she juggled multiple jobs, waitressing at the Strathaven Hotel and serving coffee in nearby cafes, saving for travel and her first apartment. Her family described her as a listener, a quiet healer of others. If someone was hurting, she noticed before they even said a word. Grace McCabe, a friend who later became a Miss Scotland finalist, once said, "Phoenix reached out when I was at my lowest. She reminded me that even in darkness, there's always a spark." That spark became her symbol, but sparks attract everything, even those who can't bear to see others shine. The perfect couple Phoenix lived in East Kilbride, Scotland, with her boyfriend Euan Methven, a 27-year-old postal worker. They'd met at a family party, the kind of simple encounter that felt like destiny. To everyone around them, they looked perfect. Young, stable, kind. Euan was polite to her parents, especially to Alison Spencer, Phoenix's mum, who texted him often and thought of him almost like another son. 2 years together, holidays, birthdays, family dinners, they had it all. But appearances, they lie quietly. Behind smiles and photos, small cracks had begun to appear, cracks Phoenix never recognized for what they were. The control disguised as care. It started softly. Euan didn't like her late shifts. He'd text, "Wish you were home. I get lonely without you." Sweet words, right? But slowly, they turned into questions. Why are you always at work? Do you have to talk to everyone there? Phoenix's kindness became his weapon. Whenever he complained, she apologized. She tried harder. She adjusted her schedule, stayed home more, worked less. Each apology gave him more control. Friends noticed her pulling away, but assumed she was just busy. Her parents never saw the tension, because in front of them, Euan was perfect. By late 2024, Phoenix was living inside invisible walls, a relationship that looked safe, but felt like walking on glass. The weekend that changed everything. Saturday, November 16th, started normally. Phoenix woke up cheerful, ready for her shift. Euan went to deliver mail. To everyone they met that day, they seemed fine. But messages later found on their phones told a different story. That afternoon, Euan texted her again, complaining about her work, saying he felt forgotten. Phoenix, ever the peacekeeper, replied, "I'm sorry, I'll be home soon." Those would be among her last words. That evening, she served her final tables at the hotel, waved goodbye to co-workers, and headed home. At 9:37 p.m., she texted her mum, "All good, we're just having dinner." Alison smiled at her phone, never imagining that message would be the last time she heard from her daughter alive. Somewhere between that text and midnight, the fragile balance shattered. The arguments that had simmered for months erupted. And inside that quiet flat on Glenlee Drive, Phoenix's bright future ended. The silence that followed. Neighbours later told police they heard movement, footsteps, a thud, then silence. When the noise stopped, the building fell eerily still. Euan stayed inside through the night. By dawn, Phoenix was gone, and the man who had promised to love her was planning his escape from what he had done. The 48 hours of deception. Instead of calling for help, Euan began a 48-hour cover-up that investigators would later describe as methodical and heartless. He cleaned, he moved things, he erased what he could. Then, as if nothing had happened, he picked up Phoenix's phone and became her. When Alison texted the next morning, he replied softly, "Fee's still sleeping. We were up late." He even added the little X that Phoenix always used to end her messages with. Hours later, another text came. "Hey Mum, just woke up XXX." Every word was calculated to sound like Phoenix. Alison believed her daughter was safe. She had no reason to doubt a man she'd welcomed into her home for Sunday roasts and family holidays. But Phoenix was already gone, and Euan was living among the remains of his crime like a stranger to his own conscience. The pretense of normal. While Alison waited for her daughter's usual calls, Euan drove around East Kilbride in Phoenix's red Vauxhall Corsa. He sent more texts from her phone, spoke to dealers trying to buy drugs, and even scrolled through social media as if nothing had happened. Detectives would later trace every movement through his digital footprints, each step contradicting the story he would try to tell. It was the cruelest illusion, a man pretending his victim was still alive so her mother could sleep peacefully for 2 more nights. But guilt doesn't stay quiet forever. By Monday morning, the walls of that flat must have felt like they were closing in. Phoenix had been due at work. She didn't show up. Her colleagues called. No answer. No. The manager called her mum, and within hours, concern turned into fear. Euan could see his lies unravelling. At noon on November 18th, he finally dialed 999. The confession. The recording still chills everyone who's heard it. A calm voice says, "I had a psychotic break and killed my wife." No panic, no tears, just a flat admission, followed by excuses about drugs and stress and blackouts. He wanted to sound like a man who'd lost control, not one who'd made choices. When officers arrived at the flat, the scene was beyond anything they had imagined. Even seasoned detectives stepped back in shock. In their reports, they used one word again and again, calculated. Euan was arrested on the spot. He appeared almost relieved, like a man who had been waiting to hand over his secret, but not his soul. The investigation. The next weeks revealed just how carefully Euan had tried to rewrite the story. Forensic teams reconstructed his movements through GPS logs and fitness apps. Data from his phone showed bursts of activity during the time of the attack and searches afterwards that investigators found unimaginable. Delivery receipts and texts proved he had been lucid, sober, and in control. The pretense of a psychotic episode fell apart completely. Neighbours spoke of no drugs, no alcohol, no disturbance, just a brief silence after a single commotion. Most heartbreaking of all were the messages to Alison. Police read them aloud in court, each one an imitation of a daughter's voice crafted by her killer. For the family, that was the moment the loss became real. The courtroom. The trial drew national attention. Journalists described Euan as expressionless, a young man with nothing left inside. He pleaded guilty to murder, but his lawyers tried to soften it with claims of mental strain and drug use. Judge Lord Matthews didn't accept it. In his verdict, he said, "This was not madness. It was possession, the belief that she belonged to you." He sentenced Euan Methven to life imprisonment with a minimum of 23 years before parole. Inside the courtroom, Alison Spencer sat still. No tears, just a mother staring at the man who had pretended to be her daughter for 2 days. The aftermath. When the sentence was announced, Alison spoke quietly outside the court. "If God had told me I could have Phoenix for only 21 years, I'd still take them. Every minute was worth the pain." Those words broke through the newsroom noise and went viral across Scotland. They were the words of acceptance, but not forgiveness. In honour of Phoenix, her family donated the funds raised through a public campaign to Women's Aid Scotland, an organisation supporting victims of domestic abuse. The charity later wrote, "Her name now means action. It means refusing to let her story end in silence." From that moment, Phoenix Spencer Horn became more than a victim's name. She became a movement. What we learn. Every time we tell stories like this, we ask the same questions. How does love turn into control? How does control become violence? And why do the warning signs hide behind words that sound like care? Phoenix's story shows how danger can wear a smile. How someone can say, "I miss you," and really mean, "I own you." It's a reminder that abuse doesn't always start with a blow. Sometimes it starts with a text message and a quiet apology. Rising from the ashes. In the years since that unimaginable night, the world has moved forward. But for those who loved Phoenix, time never fully started again. Her family and friends refused to let her story fade into another headline, another tragedy swallowed by the endless cycle of news. They turned their grief into something living, something that could help others survive what Phoenix could not. They called it Project Phoenix, a name chosen not just because it was hers, but because it represented what she stood for: rebirth, hope, and the belief that even the deepest ashes can give rise to light. Every year, they gather in her hometown. Candles are lit, one by one, until the night glows softly with hundreds of tiny flames. Each light carries a promise that her voice will never be silenced again. Among those candles, her mother, Alison Spencer, stands quietly. Sometimes she speaks, sometimes she doesn't. But when she does, her words leave the crowd in tears. She tells the young girls in the audience, kindness is beautiful, but never let it cost you your freedom. Real love doesn't shrink who you are, it helps you grow. That single line has now been printed on posters, on leaflets, on bracelets handed out at schools across Scotland. It has become more than advice. It's a warning written from the heart of a mother who has lived the worst kind of loss. Alison's strength surprises everyone who meets her. There's pain in her eyes, yes, but also a quiet fire, the same spark her daughter once had. She travels to schools, community centres, women's shelters, anywhere someone will listen. She speaks to teenagers about the signs Phoenix never recognised, the subtle manipulation, the apologies that sound like love but feel like guilt, the loneliness that grows even when you're not alone. She tells them that abuse doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it wears a smile, and sometimes it says, "I love you," before it breaks you. Students sit in silence as she talks, not out of politeness, but because they see their own reflections in her words. They see how easy it is to mistake control for care. They realise how important it is to have conversations that might one day save a life. Through her pain, Alison has built something Phoenix would be proud of. Because Project Phoenix isn't just a memorial, it's a movement. It's workshops for young people, it's resources for families, it's training for teachers to recognise when a student is silently crying for help. And every time someone leaves one of those sessions a little more aware, a little more cautious, it's like Phoenix's voice still echoes in the room. From tragedy, a ripple of change began, spreading outward, slow but steady. And though Alison would trade it all just to have her daughter back, she knows this is what Phoenix would have wanted, to help others, to bring light into darkness, even from beyond the grave. The legacy today, if you walk down Glenlee Drive, you wouldn't know what happened there. The building stands quiet, the same shade of pale brick, the same narrow windows. Neighbours have come and gone. New tenants live in the flat now, unaware that it was once a crime scene that shattered an entire community. But for those who knew her, that address will never be just another home. Every time they pass by, they slow down. They glance up at those windows, and though the walls are silent, they swear they can still feel her presence. Not haunting, but lingering, like the last note of a song that refuses to end. For Phoenix's friends, life is split into two eras, before and after. Before, when she was laughing over coffee, making plans, talking about trips she wanted to take. And after, when her name became something they had to say in the past tense, some of them still write to her. Letters they'll never send, filled with things they wish they had said. Others visit the small memorial bench placed in her memory at a nearby park. Fresh flowers appear there almost every week. Sometimes there's a handwritten note tucked beneath the bouquet. "You're still shining, Fee." Grace McCabe, the friend who once called Phoenix her lifeline, often speaks about her during interviews. She says that whenever she steps on stage, she feels Phoenix beside her, not as a ghost, but as a guardian. She tells people, "She saved me once by listening. Now I carry her strength wherever I go," and maybe that's the truth of legacy. It isn't carved in stone or written in court verdicts. It lives quietly in the people who refuse to forget, in the way friends carry her laughter, the way her mother carries her lessons, the way strangers say her name and promise to do better. Phoenix's story reminds us that the worst kind of monsters are not always strangers in dark alleys. Sometimes they sit across the dinner table. Sometimes they wear a familiar smile. And sometimes they make us believe we're safe right until the moment we're not. Yet even after everything, her story is not one of defeat. Because every time a young woman recognizes a red flag and chooses to walk away, every time a mother talks to her daughter about boundaries and respect, every time someone donates to a shelter or checks in on a friend, Phoenix rises again. Her name means rebirth. It always did. From ashes to light, from darkness to justice, from tragedy to truth. The world will move on, as it always does. But for those who loved her, and for those who have heard her story, Phoenix isn't gone. She's the morning sun that cuts through a storm. She's the quiet strength inside survivors who decide to live. She's proof that even after the darkest night, light still finds a way. We often end these stories with sentences about verdicts and years in prison. But the truth is, justice on paper never feels complete. Euan Methven will spend decades behind bars, yet Phoenix's family serves a life sentence too, of memories and emptiness. If you or someone you know is trapped in a controlling relationship, please reach out for help. Control isn't love, silence isn't safety, because every phoenix deserves to rise before the flames come. I'm Nora, and this was Dark Justice. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay aware, and see you in the next story.